In this episode, Andrew talks with Bill McCluggage. Following a career as an engineering officer in the Royal Air Force, IT Director of Harland & Wolff Heavy Industries, as well as roles as Deputy UK Government CIO, the first Irish Government CIO, CTO for EMC Systems, and the CIO and CIRO for the Northern Ireland Civil Service. Bill established his own business and has worked for a range of public and private sector clients. Bill was also head of information security, assurance and counter-fraud at the UK's open banking implementation entity. Currently, Bill is non-executive director with FCDO Services, a trading fund within the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. He is a director of Triangle Housing Association, where he's a chair of the Audit and Risk Committee, a non-executive board member of the Australian data security company Cocoon Data, and a CISO advisor for Tanium, a US cyber security software company. In 2022, Bill became the director and chairman of the NI Ireland Fraud Forum. More recently, Bill joined the Council of the University of East Anglia and is chair of their audit committee. Bill is a fellow of the BCS and a freeman of the Worshipful Company of Information Technologists in the City of London. Welcome to What the Privacy.
Now, last podcast, I had some feedback to say, for goodness sake, take more time on introducing your guest, which, of course, this week is Bill McCluggage. And also, Andrew, make sure you have a more of a slower ending. So before I launch into introducing Bill, at the end, I'm going to ask you a question. And it's a rather childish question. And all I want you to do, Bill, is answer it truthfully. I don't need to prevaricate. It's a rugby question. Niall Mackay from Topsec Solutions will be smiling. Particularly, I'd only ask this question after this weekend because I feel more comfortable because England just scraped past Wales. That's when we know that we'll be ending the call. Anyway, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Bill McCluggage, he's been a customer, he's been a colleague, and I'll call you a friend, if that's correct.
Yes.
I've known Bill for a few years. Bill has a longer history than me, I think, in cybersecurity, IT security, as we used to call it. I originally knew Bill through the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office for an Australian crypto file sharing company. And also, I did do some work with him and speak to him quite often. His involvement in the open banking implementation, which was pretty big in the UK. So if I carried on going through your resume, Bill, it would take about 20 minutes of this 25-minute podcast. There's one final thing you might not know about him. And I did check this out. I did Google it. I know he's a DJ. And is it Radio Cracker?
Yeah, it's Radio Cracker. Well, thank you very much indeed for the opportunity to come on board, Andrew. And after that erudite description of what I've done, I just feel like a knackered old fart, really. I would never, having known you for so long, consider you to be cynical in any shape or form. Not, as I say, because you do have that capability to analyse certain perspectives on cybersecurity and on IT security, and just bring it down to what people can understand. Now, I've had a fairly long career, moved from aerosystems engineering right the way through into IT. And then from IT into cybersecurity. Now I'm sort of focusing a little bit more on the outcomes. You know, people talk about, we have to secure items. We have to make sure the perimeters are secure, the defenses are in place. And actually, in many instances, it's the outcomes that affect human beings. So it's fraud. It's the damage that's done to reputations. It's a whole series of things that the nasty guys and girls are perpetrating. So, data privacy is one aspect of it, and it's exceptionally important. And it's more down to the human side of the business, rather than, we can spend lots of money on the technical measures, but actually when it comes down to it, it's about the impact it has on you as an individual, that you don't want to be bombarded by spam. You don't want to be bombarded by nasty hackers with phishing emails. But ultimately, whenever your data is released out there, that's the outcome. And the outcome can be quite insidious, pernicious even, in terms of the losses and stuff that's going on, because at the early stage of it, the kill chain, as we call it, that observation, that reconnaissance is being done for a nasty purpose.
Do you think that the proportion of the population understand that? Or we're blindly walking in with
do you
our
need to
eyes
know
wide
how
open?
do you need to know how a tin of beans gets on a supermarket shelf?
No.
No. We tend to make this, as technical specialists, we tend to go overboard in terms of should people understand it. No, they shouldn't need to have to understand it. They should be protected. You just have a look at what's happening with Meta at the moment, and the oversight board's decision that, with AI, that actually it's fine to do this stuff. It is AI generated, and they don't seem to have any responsibility. It's almost like the gun lobby. We manufacture guns. It's not us that does it. It's somebody else who uses them.
Yeah.
So it's almost back down to that responsibility of the vendor or the channel carrier. Where do the telecommunications industry take responsibility for the fact they're delivering these nasty pieces of phishing email, because they could turn off a lot of the sites that these originate from?
So going back to your bean analogy,
yeah,
do I read the ingredients? I do, because I'm a celiac, but do I read the ingredients on the side of Heinz beans? It's like if Meta is selling a product and you sign up to it, do you read the terms and conditions? No, you don't. So we had a student working for us as work experience, and she was 16, 17. She's brilliant. And she was too savvy, actually. And she said that it's down to the individual to say that if I'm signing up to something, I must be aware of what data I'm giving away or what I'm allowing that company to look at. So you're saying that is Meta's responsibility. You sign up to it. You don't read the terms and conditions like TikTok, and they make hay.
Well, if I use, people who know me know that I use a lot of analogies, but you go into McDonald's these days and you get a cup of coffee and it says hot on the side of it, right? That's because they did, I understand it, have a really hot franchise, that roasted the water, and it could be considered to be dangerous. But at what point do we turn around and say, and a lot of now, of course, companies and organizations are trying to place the responsibility on the consumer to turn around and say, you need to understand all the stuff behind it before you sign up to our service, or you decide to put your data in our repository or whatever. No, I'm a firm believer that, keep it simple, stupid. I am stupid. I am simple. And I want to know that whenever I use a service, it's as safe as possible for me. I don't want to have to worry about all of the privacy stuff that goes on behind the scenes. I just know, I want to know that they're being professional in looking after my data whenever I give it to them.
Yeah, that's putting the actual emphasis of privacy or protection of the data, and all that word privacy, back on the service provider.
Yeah, you look at the bank. You look at the banking service, and if you get defrauded, the banking through an authorized push payment fraud or whatever, the banks are responsible for paying you back. That's that and so where are we with the fact that a lot of the telecoms industry are acting as channels and routes for our data backwards and forwards, and they seem to not understand. Well, they do. They just try and shy away from it because they don't want the legal and the financial risk of having to deal with it. It's just stunning that in fact now we're moving towards much more of a litigation environment where people who've had their data breached by organizations who've not been reasonable, who've not put in place the correct types of processes, are actively now being pursued in class action suits. I just look at the PSNI breach here in Northern Ireland. I live in Northern Ireland for your readers, and that's going to amount to millions whenever the police come back and turn around and say, well, it was your processes and your people that got this wrong, and my data was released, and it's put me in personal harm or risk of personal harm.
A couple of things. Banks, if you get defrauded, they'll pay you back. Correct. My experience, and I always say never do anecdotal evidence, but here we go. My experience is if I get defrauded, they'll pay me back. They won't pursue. they won't pursue the cyber criminal because it's cheaper to give me the money back than actually do the investigation.
Yeah, that's right. They're taking a financial liability on themselves to turn around and pay you back. That's not the same as turning around and saying you're going to go after the criminals.
But just touch on the banks. There's got to be a tipping point, Bill, where there's so much money being scammed off us that the bank's got to say, we've actually got to stop paying or giving Bill and Andrew the money back. We've actually got to put in some remedial or some proactive action to pursue the cyber criminals. Because how much money do they put back for bad debt? I think it's 20%. What happens when it gets to 19% and then it goes across to 21%? There's got to be a tipping point. On the PSNI one, which is Police Service Northern Ireland, where there is a lack of governance within the organisation that resulted in a few hundred police officers and support staff's data being exposed. Now, you're saying, will there be a class action against PSNI? Hopefully there is, but how long will that take? And then in the UK, you need to get a litigation fund, which is nigh impossible. If you look at the class actions in the States where the system's slightly different, there's class actions on class actions as well. They actually, if you win a deal, you don't have to pay. They'll just take a cutting off cut the top from winning the class action. So, if you look at bring up the post office Fujitsu stuff, I know that's a different scenario. That's about the software bug. That's taken years. Years. So I don't think the UK's up for class actions. The EasyJet one, the ICO, Information Commissioner's Office, didn't pursue the ICO investigation on EasyJet because they didn't have enough resource. But they had enough resource to do a data brokering company or marketing company because they're sending out too many spam emails. So I think it's a different sort of scenario for the UK and the US. But definitely you're right. Yeah, the increase in class actions in the States is phenomenal. And the speciality of the lawyers on understanding cybersecurity, the implications and privacy and all the things that go around it, there's a lot more emphasis over there than over here. In my experience of lawyers over here, they're still catching up, and they're also slightly naive in the way they're approaching it as well, because as we know, some of them ambulance chase, which of course I always think ambulance chasing is profiling.
Yeah, let me correct you to start with. There were 9,500 police officers and staff whose data was released in the Northern Ireland breach.
I was only up by 9,000.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's approximate. So let's say approximate. So 9,500 plus individuals were put at risk by a set of process failures. So to be specific about it, it was about a freedom of information request that came through, and the report states, and it's an open report, that actually it was about the fact that that freedom of information going through the process, there were some glitches in an Excel spreadsheet that was taken out of a SAP system, and columns were hidden, etc. And lo and behold, it went through the system, and it was then released as a spreadsheet rather than a PDF. If what had happened had been under proper governance, they would have done the correct things and it wouldn't have happened. So there is a case there that says it was the process failure throughout the system, and therefore the organisation. I've got to be very careful, but making any legal statements, etc. But there will be class action suits, I'm sure.
But that's the most extreme, shocking example I've seen over the last 2 years, because that data released is a threat to life.
Yes.
In the wrong hands, it's a threat to life.
But you go back to the latest one that we've been discussing earlier on, the Connecticut College, and the fact that whenever you look at statements that come out that say, well, it may have been, released, a PI may have been released. It's all that sort of that statement which is shrouded in ambiguity. And also, then there's no evidence that suggests that the data has been used. That's not the point. The data may well be used, because it's sitting in a repository somewhere on the dark web or in the hands of people who've captured the data. So it's not a case of it hasn't been used to date. It may well have been. How do they know? And if it's not used now, it may well be put into what, as we've talked about before online, one of the largest data repositories that are now out there that you can use to effectively sanitize your data in terms of the attack vectors with Mr. Nasty, the malicious guys who can use it to hone down and spearfish you as an individual.
Yeah, so when I posted that on LinkedIn, it's about a college that got compromised last year. They took 10 months to announce it to the students and to the market, post-SEC, so post-December the 15th. And the reason why I posted it was because I was struggling with the English within the article. And what we're seeing more and more from organizations is a legal response on it's not what you say, it's what you don't say. So the evidence, there is no evidence that any of the data has caused harm. And I didn't really expect that post to start such a barrage of results. Not only they took 10 months to announce the breach, they've got over 18,104 compromised accounts, over 373 breaches. That's standard in universities.
Yeah, it's systemic failures. Now, going back to privacy, my son is a specialist in paid search. And it's great having conversations with him because he'll tell me exactly how and what they know about individuals and how you're segmented. And he works business to consumer, and it is stunning the amount of knowledge that organizations now have at you because data is out there. Now, some would turn around and say it breaches privacy, but actually it's legitimate and it's perfectly lawful, and it's being used to, from his views, to provide you with a better journey because they're not sending you out a lot of irrelevant rubbish that you would otherwise not want. So if they can define you in a better way by going onto your digital footprint and pulling that in, they can give you a better service. Doesn't that sound attractive? And yet out there is all of your data. My daughter, we were talking about it yesterday, and she was talking about the fact that she is able to go in when she was at school and college. Whenever the girls had a boyfriend, she was able to go in open source and check up on them just to find out their backgrounds. Now, it's a bit trolley, but in terms of being she wouldn't go after them or anything like that. But she can now quite quickly, because she knows she doesn't have any specialist tools, but she knows how to mine the internet to get the details on an individual or something specific, and it's relatively straightforward. And we live in that environment now. So whether you agree that data privacy is dead, which some people would experts in the field would probably turn and say, no, it's not really. You can still be anonymous to a certain extent. If you're living a normal life, you probably can't be.
Two things. Privacy is your fundamental right. Yeah. But I'm with you. It's dead. You saying about your son, what he does. We received an email from a chap who's selling our competitions email. And as you say, all the competitions contacts are out there. He says, I'll read you the email. It's the fourth time he's sent it to us, the fourth time we've deleted it. It says, hi, I hope this note finds you well. I had an endeavour to search you on the web and thought to check if you would be interested in acquiring an opt-in contact list from X company, one of the biggest cybersecurity companies that got our competition. We have a global reach and access to key decision makers, blah, 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 blah. But this is the information available. So it's either he's got it from someone within the organization. So information available for each contact person, title, email, contact number, company details, web, physical address, city, state, country, revenue, employee side, SIT code. It just goes on. Wow.
Well, why are you surprised? Because,
I'm not surprised.
I look at this and I go, why are you surprised? Because,
Yeah.
people contact me all the time to see whether, in fact, they can mine my black book, which is, exactly the same as turning around and saying, excuse me, I've managed with an insider I'm friendly with who's either sold me or provided me with a database that they've been working on of contacts in the marketing or sales business or whatever. And it's data is now easily accessible when you're in the business. So data loss prevention environments are struggling to keep up with the capability. And even if you do it on, you do a screen grabs and screen scraping and stuff like that, you can get that information if you're an employee, and it can move. Now, there is tightening up of the legislation that will stop, and my son is relatively concerned about the fact that they won't be able to give you a better personalized journey because of the GDPR constraints and stuff like that coming in from the European Union, which and from the UK, for instance, which will stop them having access to more defined and data that sits on you as an individual. But they're doing that, and it is legitimate, and it's benefiting the company, and it's benefiting the client. The last thing you want to do is to end up going to an event or to a place that's closed or whatever, whenever that you can be given better personalized data because they know about you and your likes and dislikes, and that now that's is it a breach of privacy? Well, it is if you object to it. But when all the GDPR rules as well, a bit contentious, but the GDPR rules are putting requirements and compliance requirements onto legitimate businesses who will legitimately comply and have lawyers and teams. The criminal, he doesn't care about GDPR as far as they're concerned. They can sell and move and data all around the place. So you get this reassurance that something's happening across Europe and the UK in terms of privacy, but actually the criminals and the people who are working in the black market on data don't care. They don't give a damn. They're getting money for it.
And then it's understanding what the governments have to do, or like the National Cybersecurity Centre, have to have a description for the public on if this sort of data is found out within the dark web and sold. These are the implications, or this is the impact, but this is what you should do in order to reduce your risk.
Well, yeah, it comes from two different directions. It comes from, what do you do if it's been breached or whatever? So it's almost like three different directions. The worst one is what happens if it's been breached. And the National Cybersecurity Centre says what it does on the tin. It's cybersecurity. It's sitting out there. The second one is, how do you prevent that? How do you what actions do you take in terms of not posting on social media, going on a holiday, so that people don't break into your house? And the third bit is the strength that's now coming in, or should be coming in. I'm not sure whether they'll have the strength to do it, but the Online Safety Act, where we've got Ofcom as a regulator, what rules and regulations and compliance regimes are they going to place on the likes of the Metas of this world, the telecommunications industry, all of those things, which from an online safety perspective seems to be focused primarily. It was driven by sexual exploitation of children and what have you, but there's a large proportion in there now built in, thankfully, after the debates in the Houses of Parliament, on the two houses, on fraud. So they do now have legal compliance capability if they decide that they want to use it. And behind the act, the primary legislation comes secondary legislation and hopefully statutes and compliance regimes.
But it's only good if it's got teeth, and it's only good if there's actually some visible examples of people that are not protecting your data are taken to court, and that's not happening.
Yeah,
very rarely.
Yeah, I think we end up turning around and I, as I say, I use analogies a lot of the time, but this digital environment is relatively young. It's not that young, but it's still relatively young and immature. And the highway code and the traffic legislation and the rules around the road, and that's been around for decades, if not hundreds of years, and it's matured into the way things are governed we're still not doing that. We've got it's almost out of sight, out of mind. It's all bleeps and squeaks and ones and noughts flashing around an internet that we can't even see, and it, sort of sits in the back of our mind that, well, are we safe? Are we not safe? I don't know.
I'm too old. I'd actually fail the written test on the driving test these days because it's.
Oh, we're gonna. Yeah, once you get a certain age, you have to retake it, do you? I don't know. You've got to be careful, Andrew.
I'm going to wrap this up soon, but it's two points I want to make. In California, I think it's becoming federal law. I know Jennifer Saunders, an attorney who I talk to quite often, she might correct me, is that they're creating a federal portal where you can put your name in, Bill McCluggage, and ask all the data brokers to take off your data.
Yeah.
But by the time you're taking off your data, you'll end up in another data broker's pool, and then you'll have to ask it a week later.
There's some really interesting stuff going on around right to be forgotten, and particularly whenever you get into AI and large language models, where if you are forgotten, if you decide you want to act and a number of people act to be forgotten, how is that going to alter the large language model and the outcomes and the responses from the prompts and data training and what have you? So and how do you forget? How do you get the metadata through the system to strip you out of some of the large language models where you've percolated all the way through the system and you're now sitting as a data point in a large language model? It's mind-bogglingly complex for a layman like me, and I'm a layman, aren't I, really, in AI? But
Well, but AI is just an algorithm with a bigger processing engine, which allows you to manipulate and aggregate the data more.
Yeah, it makes data more accessible, and it also makes the algorithmic processing of that data more accessible.
But it's the tools like Bard and ChatGPT just brought AI into the frame. We've lost sight of zero trust. The marketing people have just gone banzoid on AI, but we had AI last year. But they're just thinking, well, actually,
we had AI, and when I was in open banking, we brought an AI engine in. It was more a machine learning engine, but it was AI engine to do anomaly detection. Now that was 4 years ago, so it's not as if it's new boy on the block territory. It's just because open AI and stuff has come to the fore in the last year. But it's very quick for the negative people to be able to go in and say, right, if your data's in a large language model that's accessible, evil GPT and a worm GPT and a whole series of nasty GPTs that are coming out now are being tuned to be able to go look for specific characteristics. So
just think of the cybersecurity, the hacker element. They're deploying that. So they'll have a massive spreadsheet, they'll get an engine, and then they'll start either analysing Bill McCluggage, getting all his credentials, account takeover, focusing on all the access points he has, or they'll do massive brute force attacks. And all they need is 1 in a million to tap that button.
Well, I think you've got to alter your perception about brute force attacks across tens of thousands, if not millions, of accounts. Nowadays, we're entering the territory where it can be, instead of a 1 to
millions,
many to 1 to millions, it's 1 to 1, and that can be done exceptionally rapidly. So it'll be almost like a scanning engine going across, turning around and saying, right, we've got now the capability to do this, and so it not terrifies me, but we are entering into a new epoch of the era of AI.
Well, on that positive note, I'm going to come to my question. So
go on, hit me with a rugby question.
It was that I'd only had asked it. I didn't know what question I was going to ask after I was watching the England-Wales game, and got to the 72 minutes, and I thought, oh yeah, England taking the lead now. Now I can ask the rugby question for Bill. So this is the question: who came third in the World Cup behind South Africa and New Zealand?
I would say I would. I have not got a clue.
Of course you don't. Yeah, of course you know. Yes. Oh, because you guys got knocked out in the quarterfinals, didn't you? That's why. So,
I'm not going to say. I was at Ireland match yesterday, which was great in Dublin, and it was a win against Italy, which was it's a good win for Ireland. I'm an Ireland supporter, so even though I have a strange accent for being Irish, but I do follow it, and certainly now, when you look at it, my question back to you is why is rugby such a gentlemanly spectator sport compared to football in England?
I don't know. It's I don't know. Maybe they get rid of all the aggression on the pitch.
On the pitch, yeah. So you're watching gladiators or something like that performing on the pitch.
It's a different cultural thing, isn't it? It's a different tribal thing. Going to watch the team down in Cornwall's pretty good. It's a lot of but they still don't get that tribal.
What you failed to come back to me on, I generalised. And therefore, from a specific on privacy, getting back to the original discussion point, there's a huge amount of generalization goes on around privacy, and we've got to be very much more challenged and challenging in terms of defining what it is we need to do to ensure there's an adequate level of privacy for people who need it.
Or we just get rid of privacy and then we say, all right, we have no privacy. I'll work with the organisation I signed up to. I understand what the T's and C's are, and I'll manage my own privacy. With the organisation, I will step up. And why spend all this money on all this technology to protect myself? Well, there's so many different vulnerabilities out there which will not help me out. I will step up, and so the companies can make millions of pounds of savings by not deploying all this technology to protect the data, and we all accept privacy is dead.
Well, I tend towards that, but I'm going to come back on that and turn around and say, if you believe your personal data is an asset and a valuable asset, then you should be looking after, and the people you give it to should be looking after it in the same way as they look after your cash or your investments. And I'm working with a small company that is sort of putting together an offering that allows you to define what is green data, which is easily deployable across open environments, amber data, which is a little bit more sensitive, and then red data you don't want to share, and it actually is only being shared with specific trusted environments. And finally, just to end it on a positive note, I think zero trust is fantastic. We tend to be talking about it from a technology perspective. Do people really know what zero trust is? Well, actually, zero trust is also in processes. And, do I trust you in terms of an individual? And trust is earned and built. It's not something that you just build into a system and it'll work.
Thanks for that, Bill. That's a cracking point to make at the end. On that note, I'd like to thank Bill for his time. Bill's been a great guest. Don't forget to look out for him on Radio Cracker. Bill McCluggage from, is it Ballymena?
Ballymena here in County Antrim. And I put my radio voice, I'm also on Radio Larne, East Antrim's best music station.
Cheerio. Good night.